Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we know at least three things in tomorrow's budget. The Liberals plan to borrow a lot of money. The Liberals have no real plan to create the jobs we need today. And the Liberals will have to raise taxes because borrowed money has to be paid back. And we know, Mr. Speaker, with previous track records, when Liberals spend a lot of money, it usually leads to waste and mismanagement. So, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister confirm that because of his mismanagement, Canadians will be stuck with his bills, and not just us, but our kids and our grandkids?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
In last year's election campaign, Canadians had an opportunity to listen to the various perspectives that political parties put forward and the plans for the future of this country. And we put forward a plan that focused on investing in our communities, helping the middle class, and creating growth in a way that would help all Canadians. And that's exactly what we campaigned on. That's exactly what we're going to be delivering in tomorrow's budget. We are comfortable with the fact that Canadians know that we need investment and growth, because for 10 years they simply didn't get that from the previous government.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows full well that we had the best growth record in the G7. Tomorrow is shaping up to be a very expensive day for Canadians. When it comes to spending other people's money, the Liberals just can't help themselves. They're borrowing billions of dollars. They have no plan to pay back this money other than raising taxes, and across the country, hardworking Canadians and families are losing their jobs. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister think it's fair that the average Canadian is digging deeper and deeper in their pockets to pay his bills?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians understand that we have the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7. There are lower and the low interest rates.
Order. I hope we can all hold our applause until the Prime Minister finishes his answer.
Record low levels of interest rates right now mean that this is an opportunity to invest in our future. Confident, optimistic economies are willing to invest in their future, in their children's future. For 10 years, the previous government did nothing but shave away and cut instead of investing in the kind of tomorrow that Canadians need. This is the budget that Canadians have been asking for through the last election campaign. This is what we're delivering to grow the economy and help the middle class.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the truth is business investment has dropped off the cliff since they've been elected.
That's right.
Et, Monsieur le Président, les libéraux ont brisé toutes leurs promesses économiques. Ils n'ont aucune crédibilité. Pendant la campagne électorale, ils ont promis qu'ils allaient faire un modeste déficit de 10 milliards de dollars. Est-ce que le Premier ministre va admettre que c'est à cause de sa mauvaise gestion que les Canadiens devront payer pour ces dépenses hors de contrôle?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Monsieur le Président, pendant la campagne électorale, nous avons mis de l'avant un plan pour investir dans nos communautés, pour aider la classe moyenne, pour créer de la croissance économique. C'est exactement d'ailleurs ce que la communauté d'affaires, ce que les économistes à l'international et ici au Canada disent que le gouvernement canadien devrait faire. Alors, nous sommes alignés non seulement avec les Canadiens, mais aussi avec les experts qui disent que c'est le moment propice pour investir dans notre avenir, pas un moment pour couper dans les services qu'on offre aux Canadiens. C'est ça qui va créer la croissance économique et c'est ça qu'on va livrer demain.
Honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
Monsieur le Président, la semaine dernière, le directeur parlementaire du budget annonçait que notre gouvernement conservateur avait réussi à équilibrer le budget, Monsieur le Président. Et laissez-moi vous citer M. Fréchette, Monsieur le Président. M. Fréchette disait « Nous prévoyons toujours un surplus de 1,2 milliard de dollars pour 15-16. C'est notre position officielle. Le budget est équilibré en 15 et 16, Monsieur le Président. Ce matin, nous apprenons que 69% des Canadiens sont inquiets pour leur sécurité financière. Monsieur le Président, que répond le Premier ministre aux milliers de Canadiens qui s'inquiètent de voir le pays se lancer dans une foire de dépenses?
Très honorable Premier ministre.
Une chose qu'on a constatée pendant la campagne électorale de l'automne passé, c'est qu'effectivement, les Canadiens étaient inquiets pour leur avenir économique. Et malgré tout le positionnement et les promesses et les soi-disant plans d'action économique que l'ancien gouvernement avait mis de l'avant, les Canadiens étaient réellement inquiets pour leur avenir. Et c'est pour ça qu'ils ont choisi un gouvernement qui allait investir dans leur communauté, qui allait aider la classe moyenne, qui allait créer cette croissance qui, pendant 10 ans, n'a pas été là pour les Canadiens à cause du manque de leadership de l'ancien gouvernement conservateur.
Député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
Monsieur le Président, quand la population canadienne va voir augmenter ses impôts, ses taxes de façon importante, ils comprendront bien ce que le gouvernement a fait, Monsieur le Président. Entre autres, l'industrie forestière qui vit des moments difficiles. On sait qu'il y a des sujets importants comme le renouvellement de l'accord sur le bois d'œuvre avec les Américains et les marchés. C'est bien difficile aussi, mais c'est 20 milliards de dollars dans l'économie canadienne que représente l'industrie forestière, Monsieur le Président. Totalement oublié lors du discours du trône. On verra bien demain qu'est-ce qu'il y aura dans le budget pour parler de l'industrie forestière. Est-ce que Monsieur le Premier ministre peut dire à toutes les régions du pays qui vivent l'industrie forestière quelles seront les mesures dans ce budget-là?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
J'ai bien hâte de pouvoir présenter demain un budget qui va adresser les préoccupations des Canadiens à travers le pays, incluant dans les régions, incluant dans l'industrie forestière. Nous savons que c'est le temps d'investir dans l'innovation, d'investir dans nos régions, d'investir dans nos ressources naturelles pour pouvoir créer la croissance et les emplois qu'on n'a pas vus pendant 10 ans sous l'ancien gouvernement. Voici un moment pour nous de tourner la page sur 10 ans manqués pour investir encore une fois dans l'avenir. C'est ce que nous allons faire pour l'industrie forestière, pour les régions, pour tout le Canada.
Honorable député d'Outremont.
Monsieur le Président, on apprend aujourd'hui que Bombardier a l'intention de délocaliser un autre 200 bons emplois canadiens vers l'étranger. Cela s'ajoute aux 2400 familles canadiennes qui ont perdu leur gagne-pain chez Bombardier le mois dernier. Notre industrie aéronautique a besoin d'aide, mais pas au détriment de nos travailleurs et de leurs familles. Est-ce que le Premier ministre a l'intention de protéger les bons emplois d'ici dans toute entente d'aide qu'il pourra signer avec Bombardier?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, je remercie mon collègue pour sa question parce que c'en est une de très importante. Au fond, ce que nous voulons tous, c'est de protéger le bon travail des Canadiens dans l'industrie aéronautique et dans d'autres industries. C'est pour ça que nous prenons le temps nécessaire pour évaluer les propositions de Bombardier, la situation de Bombardier, pour s'assurer que s'il y a des investissements à faire, ça va être dans l'intérêt court terme, moyen terme et long terme des travailleurs de l'industrie aéronautique partout au Canada.
L'honorable député d'Outremont.
Les pertes d'emplois se multiplient ailleurs au Canada aussi. Les travailleurs ont besoin de soutien, mais moins de 4 sur 10 qui ont besoin d'assurance-emploi en ont accès lorsqu'ils en ont besoin. Les libéraux ont voté contre notre motion visant à les forcer à respecter leurs propres engagements en matière d'assurance-emploi. Le budget est demain. Le Premier ministre va-t-il finalement respecter ses propres engagements sur l'assurance-emploi, oui ou non?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Monsieur le Président, comme j'ai dit, nous avons mis de l'avant dans notre plateforme électorale des engagements concrets pour améliorer l'accès à l'assurance-emploi pour les gens à travers le pays, y compris dans des régions qui souffrent beaucoup de difficultés à cause de la baisse du prix du pétrole. Et je peux rassurer mon honorable collègue que nous allons respecter nos promesses électorales dans le budget qu'on présente demain.
J'ai bien hâte de voir ça. First Nations children across the country are living in crisis because the federal government doesn't provide them with the same resources other Canadian kids get. We have children in Saskatchewan suffering from horrible sores because they don't have access to clean, safe drinking water. We have children who desperately want to learn but are forced to attend school in third world conditions. Will the Liberal budget provide full equivalent funding to end the gap on health, water, and education for First Nations children?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. It's an important one indeed, as we have put forward since the beginning of our coming into mandate as a government, renewing the relationship, building strong infrastructure and support in communities across the country, particularly in those most vulnerable communities for Indigenous children. These are things that we're making a priority, and tomorrow's budget will feature historic investments in First Nations and Indigenous Canadians right across the country to begin to make it right that we have not done for so many decades in this place, in this building.
Honorable.
7 months ago, Alison Azer's children were kidnapped. We're talking about 4 Canadian children taken to Kurdistan in the middle of a war zone. Today, I met with Alison here in Ottawa, and she's asking once again for the Canadian government to intervene and help bring her children home. The need for action is urgent, Mr. Speaker. Why hasn't the Prime Minister bothered to call President Barzani to bring these kids home?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are fully seized with the importance and urgency of this case. Canadian consular officials are working extremely closely with the appropriate government authorities in Canada and abroad, including law enforcement, to return the children safely to Canada. Consular officials are in regular contact with Ms. Azar as we pursue the safe return of her children. Rest assured that the safety of those children is a high priority for this government.
The honourable member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are very concerned about massive deficits because, of course, they lead to increased taxes. And, in fact, polls today show that Canadians' concerns are economic in nature. First, jobs, and second, taxes. And that's what members on this side of the House have heard in the run-up to the budget that the government will be presenting tomorrow. So I'd like to know from the Finance Minister, when will he actually admit that in their campaign they misled Canadians and they said that the deficits were going to be moderate, but indeed they're not, and that these massive deficits of the Liberal government are nothing more than broken promises?
Honorable Secretary Parlementaire des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians made a clear choice last October. They decided to have a fundamentally different approach to managing our economy. Mr. Speaker, our priority is growth, and that's exactly what we're going to deliver tomorrow in our budget. We're going to focus on the middle class. We're going to help Canadian families. We're going to create growth. That's what Canadians expect of us, Mr. Speaker, and that's exactly what we're going to deliver exactly tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Milton.
I fear, Mr. Speaker, that their approach is fundamentally different. That's to spend until there really is a recession. Absolutely. Mr. Speaker, the Boys and Girls Club of Canada hosted the Finance Minister for a photo op on Friday. Now, while I laud the location choice, it's a great organization, I am very concerned about the message that he may have left for these young kids. Now, the Prime Minister's best friend, Kathleen Wynne, has already saddled these kids with $22,000 for each of them in terms of a provincial debt. Can the Minister tell us whether or not he explained to these kids as well that his out-of-control borrowing is actually going to top up what Kathleen Wynne's government has already saddled these children with for long-term debt repayment?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to say that the Minister of Finance and I went from coast to coast to coast to listen to Canadians. We did that over the months. We were elected in October, Mr. Speaker. We heard from thousands of Canadians. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians have submitted IDs online. And, Mr. Speaker, as we approach this budget day tomorrow, we took all that into consideration, and we did make a budget, Mr. Speaker, that's going to work for Canadians, and for once, they know that this government is on the side of Canadian families.
The honourable member for Brantford Grant.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow, the Finance Minister will officially plunge Canada into an extended period of massive borrowing. Already, TD Bank says the Liberals will put Canada into a deficit for at least 10 years, and experts across the board are increasingly warning that this year's $30 billion Liberal spending spree will not have any major impact on economic growth. We are not in a recession, and this budget won't deliver any major boost to the economy. Why exactly is the Finance Minister borrowing $30 billion?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable member for his question. Mr. Speaker, when the economy is growing slowly, that's the time to invest. That's what the IMF said. That's what the World Bank, that's what most economists in this country have said, Mr. Speaker. At a time where interests are low, that's the time to invest in the economy. That's what Canadians expect of us, Mr. Speaker, and that's exactly what we're going to deliver tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just that the Liberals will break their fiscal promises this year. We're now told the real big-ticket spending won't start for a couple of years. For the Liberals, a $30 billion deficit is just a starting point. Already, the finance minister is talking about raising taxes on small businesses, tech startups, and professionals. What other businesses will see their taxes go up in tomorrow's budget?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud. Thank you. I thank my honourable member for his question. Mr. Speaker, what we're going to present tomorrow is exactly a budget that's going to focus on the middle class, help Canadian families, and create growth in this country, Mr. Speaker. That's the choice that Canadians made on the 19th of October, a fundamentally different approach to running this economy. That's what most economists have said. That's what most international institutions. Mr. Speaker, this budget is a budget for Canadian family, for the middle class, and that's what we're going to deliver tomorrow.
The honourable member for Huron-Bruce.
Canadians are concerned. $1 billion of taxpayer money will still result in Bombardier shipping production to Mexico and China. There's a better solution that doesn't cost taxpayers a dime. A private Canadian company came forward with a major order for C-Series aircraft. They just need a little longer runway. When will the minister allow the expansion of the Toronto Island Airport and get Bombardier employees back to work?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We in this government are very proud of Canada's aerospace industry, and as I have repeatedly said, with respect to the question that my honourable colleague asked, we made the right decision, one of choosing a balance between commercial interests and the interests of the community, including the development of their waterfront. Thank you, sir.
Monsieur le Président, alors que le gouvernement s'apprête à attribuer une aide financière d'1 milliard de dollars à Bombardier, Bombardier s'apprête à envoyer encore plus d'emplois à l'étranger. Monsieur le Président, everybody knows that subsidies are inefficient and a waste of taxpayers' money. When will the government understand that it is not fair to force small entrepreneurs to pay taxes to fund subsidies to a corporation like Bombardier?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, we understand the importance of the aerospace sector, the high-quality jobs that it employs, the contribution it makes to our national income, Mr. Speaker, and that is why we're engaged with Bombardier. We understand that this company employs people not only in Quebec, but Ontario and Manitoba and across the country. These are high-quality jobs, and we're going to make sure we work with the company to make sure that we have investments in R&D, that we have head office jobs here in Canada. It's about growing the economy, investing in the aerospace sector, and it's fighting for good quality jobs, Mr. Speaker.
Monsieur le Président, il y a un mois, la communauté de Cachetchouan a déclaré l'état d'urgence sanitaire. Un mois plus tard, rien n'a bougé. Plusieurs enfants sont pris avec de graves infections sur le corps. Les photos de ces enfants sont troublantes et choquantes. Comment peut-on laisser nos enfants dans une telle situation? Les problèmes d'eau potable, de moisissure, de logement sont pourtant connus. Ça prend plus qu'un plaster sur le bobo, Monsieur le Président. Quelles actions le gouvernement va-t-il prendre pour régler définitivement ces situations indignes d'un pays comme le nôtre?
Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, Health Canada is fully aware of the concerns of the children in Cachetchouan First Nation. We have been involved in that community and will continue to do so. There are immediate steps that have been taken. A number of children have already been transported out of the community to get the medical attention they need. There is a medical team from Moose Factory who are going into the community to identify further cases by going door to door. There will be further steps taken to prevent further infections. We will address the public health needs in the community as well as the social determinants of health.
Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has been over a month since the communities of Treaty 9 declared a medical state of emergency, and this weekend Canadians saw that shocking face in the children of Saskatchewan. I want to thank the Indigenous Affairs Minister and the Health Minister for working with us on an emergency plan for the most severe cases, but they know the crisis is systemic. The mold, the lack of clean water, the need for a proper medical system. I'm asking the Minister, will she commit to a timeline and a plan so we can end this state of emergency and reassure these children that they can grow up in their communities healthy and hopeful and safe?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. As he is aware, Saskatchewan First Nation is among a number of communities in our country who are facing very serious gaps in their health outcomes. We are absolutely determined to address these gaps. I'm working with my colleagues in Health Canada to address not only the immediate health needs of a community like Saskatchewan and many other Indigenous communities across the country who are facing serious concerns. We are looking at how we can prevent these conditions. I am working with my colleague, the Minister of Indigenous Affairs and Northern Affairs, to address the underlying causes, and we will make sure that the health gaps have been addressed.
The Honourable Member for Portage Lisgar.
Well, Mr. Speaker, more delays from the Liberal government on job-creating infrastructure. This time it's liquefied natural gas in British Columbia that's getting roadblocks from the Liberal government. In fact, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change doesn't even bat an eye at interfering with legislated timelines. Is this the type of political interference that the Liberals promised would happen at their cabinet table?
The Honourable Cabinet Secretary for Environment.
Mr. Speaker, as we promised during the election campaign, our decisions relating to environmental approvals will be based on science and data and Indigenous consultation. Our government is ensuring that environmental risks associated with resource development projects are addressed before projects are allowed to proceed. With respect to the PNW project, on March the 4th, the proponent submitted new information with respect to this project. The request from the agency for more time reflects the fact that we must do more assessment of potential effects on fish, marine animals, and human health. We recognize the importance of timely decisions, and once the proponent has provided the additional information, we will respond within 90 days.
The Honourable Member for Portage Lisgar.
Well, Mr. Speaker, just a reminder that LNG from BC going to Asia will reduce coal use in the southern Pacific. And, Mr. Speaker, it's good for the environment globally. It's good for the Canadian economy. So again, Mr. Speaker, we ask the Liberal government, why won't they stand up? Why will they always get in the way and not go to bat for LNG instead of throwing LNG under the bus? Mr. Speaker, truck drivers in BC, workers in BC are concerned. We're looking for this Liberal government. Workers in British Columbia are looking for this government to stand up for LNG in BC.
Yeah. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member also knows, the wood fibre project was actually approved on Friday because we had thoroughly assessed the science and the data and made the decision that it could move forward in an environmentally sustainable way. We are going to take the time with the Pacific Northwest project to ensure that we understand the science and the data before we make an appropriate decision.
Honourable Member for Lakeland.
I met with natural resources developers in beautiful BC. The construction of the Kitimat LNG facility and the Pacific Northwest LNG project will create over 9,000 jobs and many opportunities for First Nations. 330 long-term local careers will sustain the PNW project. On behalf of the thousands of people who are counting on it, will the Liberals support job-creating LNG development, or will they hinder it with ongoing uncertainty and higher taxes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Environment.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House understand that the environment and the economy go hand in hand in the modern era. We are working through the process to ensure that the science and data associated with ensuring that good decisions are made are fed into the process. As we discussed, the wood fibre project was approved on Friday. We are taking the appropriate time to ensure that decisions are not based on politics, they're based on good science.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, people understandably doubt the Liberal position on Canadian energy. The Prime Minister hired anti-energy protesters like a senior advisor who said 2/3 of our fossil fuels should remain in the ground. The PM's right-hand man, Gerald Butts, wrongly believes Canada's natural resources can't be developed while reducing GHG emissions. How can Canadians trust the Liberals' support our responsible energy development when those at the top are so against it?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Speaker, as my honourable friend has said, there was a major project that was approved just last Friday in British Columbia, which was a decision of sustainability that understands that we will create these jobs while protecting the environment of British Columbia, as we will do with other major projects, Mr. Speaker. We think that we can now proudly say that we've done the right thing the right way, and we'll do it again.
L'honorable député de Saint-Hyacinthe-Bogat.
Monsieur le Président, les travailleurs attendent beaucoup trop longtemps pour tout simplement savoir s'ils auront accès à des prestations d'assurance-emploi. En moyenne, ils attendent 39 jours. Et s'ils essaient de parler à quelqu'un de Service Canada, c'est pratiquement mission impossible. Perdre son emploi est assez stressant comme ça, sans que le gouvernement en rajoute par des délais interminables. Les travailleurs sans emploi n'ont pas le luxe d'attendre. Est-ce que le gouvernement va faire le choix d'embaucher du personnel rapidement pour réduire les délais d'attente?
The Honourable Minister of Employment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is true that the employment insurance program in Canada needs modernizing and repair. Canadians are waiting too long, too difficult to collect the benefits that they actually pay for. It is time, and we're proud to say we are the government that will provide those changes to modernize the EI system.
The Honourable Member for Churchill-Kiewatinook-Askey.
Mr. Speaker, under previous Liberal and Conservative governments, thousands of new mothers were unfairly denied EI sickness benefits while on maternity leave. These mothers who became seriously ill were forced to turn to the courts, and the government has spent millions fighting them. During the election, the Liberals promised to drop the court case immediately, but 6 months have gone by and it's still ongoing. These women have been through enough already. When will the Liberals stand by their promise and drop this court case against these women?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the honourable member who raised the issue. We understand that the time for these kind of lawsuits are difficult, costly, and stressful for the women that are involved in those cases. Unfortunately, I'm unable to speak about the case because it's before the courts at this time. But I do look forward to resolving all outstanding issues that are before us.
L'honorable député de Shefford.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Avec les récentes annonces au sujet du 150e anniversaire de la Confédération du Canada en 2017, l'excitation monte en vue de cette grande année de célébration. La ministre du Patrimoine canadien peut-elle partager avec cette Chambre plus d'informations sur la vision et les principaux thèmes liés à Canada 150?
Honorable ministre du Patrimoine canadien.
Merci à mon collègue pour son excellente question. 4 principaux thèmes guideront les célébrations du 150e anniversaire de notre Confédération: la jeunesse, l'inclusion et, bien entendu, la diversité, la réconciliation avec les peuples autochtones et l'environnement. Nous avons fait plusieurs annonces la semaine dernière, que ce soit à Halifax, à Toronto et à Montréal, afin de proposer des projets structurants qui vont pouvoir laisser un legs durable et qui vont pouvoir inspirer les générations à venir. Merci.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Mr. Speaker, the Office of Religious Freedom was given a specific mandate, and it's been successful in carrying that out. It's been recognized internationally for its work and its leadership. This government has a choice. They can dilute the mandate and destroy the international work of the office, or they can enthusiastically support it and ensure its continued success. This small office has had a huge impact around the globe. Will the government commit to continuing the present mandate of the Office of Religious Freedom?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Human rights are universal, indivisible, and interdependent. They are interrelated and best defended and promoted together. As the Prime Minister has stated repeatedly, Canada's diversity is a source of strength, not weakness. So to expand on the initial good work of the office, Canada will explore the best way to situate freedom of religion within a broader human rights framework. Our goal is to build on and strengthen the good work of the office by including the protection of religious freedom as a fundamental component of a comprehensive vision of the promotion of human rights. Better is always possible.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, atheists in Canada are very concerned about the growing persecution of non-believers in Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere. Religious freedom includes the right to not believe. While some atheists were initially skeptical about the Office of Religious Freedom, they are now represented on its external advisory board. Atheists remain skeptical, of course, but not about the work of this office. Will this government finally give atheists some hope for the future, some assurance of things yet unseen, and support our motion to renew the Office of Religious Freedom?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you. A sense of humor is a wonderful thing. There's hope. As a multicultural and multi-faith country, Canada is well placed to champion all human rights internationally. In fact, our own charter guarantees everyone the fundamental freedom of religion and of expression, association and assembly, which is precisely what the member opposite was getting to, and I thank him for his question.
I hope for order. The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the United States, the European Union and the Vatican have characterized the barbaric actions of ISIS as genocide. But the Liberals refuse to use the term to describe the slaughter of Yazidis, of Christians, of Shia Muslims in territories ISIS controls. Now, is that because, Mr. Speaker, the government's watered-down so-called non-combat mission in Syria and Iraq can do nothing to stop genocide under terms of the UN Convention?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you. Canada strongly condemns the crimes perpetuated by the so-called Islamic State, including those committed against religious and ethnic minorities. But genocide is not a term to be used lightly, and Canada is a member of the International Criminal Court, which means the use of that term is different than it is for the United States, who is not. We are committed to preventing and halting genocide and crimes against humanity. We are committed to holding perpetrators of such serious international crimes to account. And our new, strong, 3-year anti-ISIL strategy seeks to address the ongoing crisis in Iraq and the destabilizing impacts on Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria.
I'm hoping we'll keep showing respect for each other and listen carefully and not interrupt. Honorable député de Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles.
Monsieur le Président, je comprends les explications de ma collègue, mais je vais poser la question. Écoutez, le Parlement européen, le pape et même le grand ami du Premier ministre, le président Obama, qualifient le terrorisme de l'État islamique contre des groupes religieux en Irak et en Syrie comme étant un génocide. Le ministre des Affaires étrangères se limite à condamner timidement leurs crimes. Est-ce que le ministre pense, comme l'administration Obama, et confirme que c'est bel et bien du génocide?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I'd like to repeat that Canada is a member of the International Criminal Court. The term genocide there means much more than the term genocide in terms of halting genocide, and the opposition should know that. This is absolutely serious. This is not the United States of Canada, and our strategy
Colleagues, we all know that each side gets to have their turn to speak, to ask questions, to answer questions, and let's let each take their time. Even if we don't like the answers or the questions sometimes, let's show respect for this place. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our anti-ISIL strategy, in fact, is an example of our strengthening conviction against the hideous crimes of ISIL, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, there is a national epidemic of drug overdoses, and the Minister of Health has acknowledged that safe injection sites like Insight in Vancouver make sense and save lives. Public health officials in Toronto and cities across Canada are asking for federal help to open these desperately needed facilities. Yet, Liberals are refusing to repeal Conservative legislation that blocks communities from providing harm reduction services. Will this government stop stalling, make an evidence-based decision, and repeal the Conservative C2?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, as my colleague well knows, we are a government who bases our decisions on evidence. In terms of the matter of problematic substance use, we will address this on the basis of public health concerns as well as a focus on harm reduction. And I am very pleased that communities across the country have recognized that our government is supportive of supervised consumption sites, which have been known to save lives, prevent infections, and help people to access the healthcare system in a safe way. We will continue to work with communities to make these sites more available.
Very good.
The honourable member for Regina Louvain.
Mr. Speaker, concerns have been raised about millions in federal funding for Regina's global transportation hub. This Crown Corporation spent $21 million buying land at inflated prices from businessmen with cozy ties to the governing Sask Party. 2 weeks ago, the Treasury Board president promised to look into this scandal. Even a former Sask Party MLA has called for a police investigation. So, will the minister now report what he found, and will he be referring this matter to the RCMP?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question and also for his inquiry when I appeared before committee. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the provincial government in Saskatchewan has actually engaged their Auditor General to look into this matter. It is a provincial matter. We look forward to the result of the Auditor General's inquiry on the provincial side. And the honourable member has played a role in provincial politics in Saskatchewan in the past. That's very good, but we would urge him to focus on his role as a member of Parliament and the federal issues here that we are seized with today.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Mr. Speaker, it has come to light that the Minister of Justice actively opposed the Site C Dam project. The Minister worked closely with Treaty 8 First Nations to oppose it for years. Now with her role at the Cabinet table, how can we be assured that she will stay neutral? The Minister's mere presence will still have an influence. Will this Minister remove herself from the discussions on this project?
Wow.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the fall of 2014, the former government approved the project and set out a range of legally binding conditions with which the proponent must comply. BC Hydro must meet the requirements set out in the decision, and we're active in verifying compliance. We will continue to be proactive in that regard. We continue to reach out to Indigenous groups to ensure that they are consulted and that we understand the concerns that are being brought forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Mr. Speaker, Benjamin Bergen was the Executive Assistant to the current Minister of International Trade and her campaign manager. Now he has begun lobbying the Liberals. His relationship with this minister gives him access to her and her cabinet colleagues. He has even stated that he has an extensive network among senior public sector officials that will be a benefit to their organization. Mr. Speaker, what is the Prime Minister going to do about yet another insider getting special access to Liberal ministers?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, once again the members opposite are looking for stories where there are none. Ben Bergen worked for me in my constituency office and never worked for me in my ministerial capacity. I am absolutely confident that he will follow all ethical guidelines. I would like to add, however, that I am a strong supporter of Canadian innovators and entrepreneurs, particularly in the tech sector, and I am delighted to have met with them and will continue to support this crucial Indigenous Canadian industry.
The honourable member for Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While people across this country were working hard this winter to balance their household budgets, our Prime Minister was in the Caribbean working hard on his tan. What's worse is that Canadian taxpayers are on the hook for $50,000 so the Prime Minister could enjoy his sunny ways. $50,000 is just the bill for the private jet to sit on the tarmac. So how much more will the Canadian taxpayers have to shell out for this Prime Minister's private Caribbean vacation?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, members of the Conservative Party know well there's a long-standing government policy for security reasons that Prime Ministers always use Royal Canadian Air Force aircraft for every purpose, including personal travel, as was the case with previous Prime Ministers. When travelling for personal reasons, the Prime Minister and members of his family reimburse an economy airfare And, Mr. Speaker, they also know that standard procedure requires, within 3 hours, the Prime Minister to be able to return to Canada in case of a national emergency. That policy existed under previous governments, and we're respecting that same policy today.
The honourable member for Don Valley North.
With the CETA agreement started by the previous government stalled since September 2014, I was thrilled to learn that our government was able to get the talk back on track for signature and implementation next year. In 2008, Canadian goods and services export to the European Union totaled $52.2 billion. Can the Minister of International Trade tell the House what the impact of CETA will be for Canada and how it can benefit the Canadians through increased growth and prosperity?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I was delighted last month to announce that the legal review of this gold-plated deal was finally complete and that we have successfully responded to Canadians' concerns about transparency and fairness in the investment chapter. I'm thrilled that this progressive deal is now moving ahead at full speed towards implementation next year. I'm also pleased that just this evening I'll have a chance to discuss the agreement with visiting members of the European Parliament's Trade Committee, a further sign of the new momentum behind CETA.
Honorable député de Portneuf, Jacques Cartier.
Monsieur le Président, un ex-candidat libéral défait, Jocelyn Coulon, est maintenant au cabinet du ministre des Affaires étrangères. Monsieur Coulon a déjà dit « l'OTAN amplifie la menace russe en Ukraine et en Europe, dans le seul but d'augmenter les budgets militaires des pays membres. » Il a même écrit « Tous les arguments sont bons pour alimenter cette campagne de réarmement, même les plus stupides. » Le ministre est-il d'accord que la menace que pose la Russie, entre autres envers l'Ukraine, n'est qu'un prétexte pour augmenter les budgets militaires de l'OTAN?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you for the question. Canada stands steadfast with Ukraine. We always have, we always will, and we have been explicit in our condemnation of Russia's unlawful annexation of Crimea. The Russian interference and invasion of Ukrainian territory is completely unacceptable. We have one of the strongest sanctions in the world, strengthened further last week in order to apply economic pressure on Russia and the Putin government for its aggression. As the government of Ukraine has said, I believe Canada will be strong and firm in its pressure on Russia.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
Mr. al-Abadi, a citizen of Iraq and former political prisoner of Saddam Hussein, managed to escape and became a government-sponsored refugee in 2002. He landed in Canada in 2007. 10 years after he fled, Saddam Hussein is no longer a threat. He traveled back to visit his family and to get married. In 2012, cessation provisions became law, and now the government wants to take away his permanent resident status. This law makes no sense. Will the minister repeal cessation provisions in Bill C-31?
Very good. Well, Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, there is some sense in these laws applied in certain ways. But on the whole, I would agree that this is part of the long legacy of things inherited from the previous government that must be reviewed and quite likely changed. So I have sympathy with the point expressed by the honourable member, and I can assure her that we will review these provisions with a view to improving them in the future.
The honourable member for St. John Rothsay.
Mr. Speaker, my home, St. John, New Brunswick, Canada's first incorporated city, established in 1783, deserves to have its story told and its place in our nation's proud history. Unfortunately, national historic monuments like Martello Tower, Fort Latour, Fort Howe, and Partridge Island are falling into ruin and have been ignored by previous governments. Projects like the restoration of Partridge Island would be transformative for my community by celebrating our past and promoting our future. What is the government's plan for reinvestment in our national parks and historic monuments?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to commend my colleague, the honourable member for St. John's Rothsay, for his advocacy on this important issue. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change was pleased to recently visit St. John, where she announced investments totaling more than $21 million in several Parks Canada sites across southern New Brunswick. This includes significant rehabilitation work on Carlton Martello Tower National Historic Site and major investments in Fundy National Park. Our government is creating jobs and taking action to ensure our treasured places are protected, celebrated, and preserved for future generations.
The honourable member for Grand Prairie Mackenzie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Several groups have called on the Liberals to make special changes to help address specific labour challenges across this country. Last week, we learned that the Liberals were moving to help the fishing industry, but agriculture was left out in the cold. Surely, the Liberals understand that agriculture is an important industry in this country, contributing billions of dollars to our national economy each and every year. Now, I'm wondering if the Minister of Agriculture will stand up in this House and demonstrate a real commitment to help solving the labour challenges being faced by our farm families.
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to say that I had an opportunity to address a National Agricultural Agri-Food Conference in Winnipeg this past week, and we talked about a number of changes that are facing the agricultural sector, including very rapid industrial and innovation changes to equipment and the challenges of finding high-skilled operators. There are new advances in terms of training and skill development, and we're working very actively with the agricultural sector.
L'honorable député de Rivière-du-Nord.
Monsieur le Président, dans l'affaire du stratagème d'évitement fiscal à l'île de Man par les clients de KPMG, en réponse à une question de mon collègue de Joliette le jeudi 10 mars dernier, la ministre du Revenu a déclaré, et je la cite, « L'Agence du Revenu du Canada n'a pas accordé d'amnistie ». Alors, ma question est simple. Puisqu'il n'y a pas eu d'amnistie, à combien s'élèvent les pénalités que l'Agence du Revenu réclame et quand est-ce que les accusations criminelles seront déposées?
Honorable ministre, Revenu national.
Monsieur le Président, il n'y a pas deux types de règles, je l'ai déjà mentionné. Et l'Agence a mis à jour le stratagème, l'Agence a vérifié les contribuables, l'Agence a lancé des actions en justice. Le travail de l'Agence n'est pas terminé. J'inviterai mes collègues à la prudence et à ne pas sauter trop rapidement aux conclusions.
L'honorable député de Montcalm.
Monsieur le Président, à la conférence de Paris, le gouvernement s'est engagé à la face du monde à lutter contre les changements climatiques. Or, selon l'Institut Pembina, la mise en service de l'oléoduc Énergie-Est entraînerait une hausse des émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 32 millions de tonnes par année. C'est l'équivalent d'ajouter plus de 7 millions de nouveaux véhicules sur les routes du Québec. Est-ce que le gouvernement va enfin admettre que le projet Énergie-Est est en parfaite contradiction avec les engagements du premier ministre à la conférence de Paris?
The Honourable Mr. Secretary for Environment.
Mr. Speaker, again, this government understands that work on the environment and the economy go hand in hand. We have a plan with respect to climate change that involves a range of tools around carbon pricing, around mitigation measures across various sectors, and around a range of different measures that will allow us to meet the commitments that we made in Paris. We have never said that energy projects will stop. We have always said that this will be done in a broad and comprehensive way as we move through the next 40 years in a transition to a lower carbon economy. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Mirabel.
Monsieur le Président, la stratégie canadienne de lutte à l'itinérance axée sur le logement d'abord ne fonctionne tout simplement pas. Le premier ministre a publiquement appuyé la démarche orchestrée par les organismes du milieu de l'itinérance pour protéger la façon de faire plus généraliste du Québec, tout en promettant d'augmenter la part du Québec à 50 millions par année. Le premier ministre va-t-il respecter son engagement ou va-t-il pénaliser ceux qui en ont besoin?
Honorable ministre du Développement social.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie mon collègue de cette importante question. C'est un sujet qui nous tient énormément à cœur. Comme on l'a souligné, c'est une question qui traite de la vulnérabilité des gens les plus sensibles, les moins nantis de notre société. Je crois que l'honorable membre sera surpris dans les prochaines semaines des nouvelles relations que nous aurons avec les provinces sur cette importante question. Merci.
This will conclude question period for today.